A person just fell asleep after work, drinking a beer and playing a game, something they did often. But when this person woke up, something was very different from what they expected. The man found himself standing in a harsh, unfamiliar land, looking like the world of the game he was just playing. A woman with white hair urgently warned the man, Sir Cottam, that stronger demons were attacking them. Cottam confidently said he would take care of the incoming demons, ready for a fight. He immediately launched a powerful attack, sending a huge fiery wave toward the enemies. The attack landed, and a massive, monstrous demon reacted with shock. Cottam followed up with a powerful downward strike against the huge monster. The sheer force of the blow caused an intense reaction from the monster. Cottam's next attack split the giant demon right down the middle with a blinding light. The surrounding smaller demons were obliterated in a flash of energy and force. The defeated demons fell to the ground like burning debris. Cottam stood over the bloody remains of the slain monsters, the battle clearly won. After the fight, he stood alone in the center of the destruction, catching his breath. Cottam thought to himself that facing high-level demons right at the start was just as expected in the demon realm. He realized that the journey to finally defeat the great demon was going to be much harder than he first believed. Even with the immediate threat gone, he knew he was still due for a serious talking to from Melissa. As fiery projectiles fell around him, Cottam braced himself. Melissa, the mage, appeared and shouted out his name in anger. She scolded Cottam for rushing into danger alone, revealing herself as Mage Melissa. Cottam simply mentioned Melissa's name as a blonde warrior stepped in. The blonde warrior jumped into action, fighting off other monsters that tried to attack while Cottam was distracted. The warrior, introduced as Hero Gale, told Melissa to save the scolding for later, as dealing with monsters was the priority. Melissa found Gale's heroic attitude a bit too much, but then she focused her power. Melissa then offered a prayer, asking for the fighting spirit of At-Allah to be with them, before turning thoughtful. The scene goes dark for a moment before showing a monster exploding. Cottam was seen dealing with a large, tough-looking demon, smashing it powerfully. Priest Gordon reassured the worried priestess Cyril, saying Cottam must have his reasons for fighting so hard. Gordon then suggested they finish the remaining monsters and then talk to Cottam, which Cyril agreed to. They agreed to focus on the remaining small fries before confronting Cottam. Cottam was shown powerfully clearing out the last few small monsters from the cliff edge. Cottam introduced himself as the vanguard of the heroes' party, followed by Gale, Cyril, and Gordon. He also declared himself the great warrior of At-Allah, the god of struggle and the wilderness. Then he added a secret detail about himself. He revealed that he was actually a transmigrator in this game world. Cottam stated clearly that he was a transmigrator in this game. The title of the game, The Berserker's Second Playthrough, flashed in intense red text. He remembered that the main story of this game was actually very simple, centered around the Great Demon. The simple plot involved the hero getting a divine revelation, gathering companions, and defeating the Great Demon. Cottam looked at the terrifying army of demons surrounding the Great Demon's location. He reflected that while some people might enjoy an adventure with these characters, it was too much for a modern person. He recalled a massive battle where the party fought against a huge horde of demons. Cottam, in his monstrous form, was drinking something deeply from a jug, showing his desperation. This world was far too intense for him, and he was surrounded by more hideous monsters. A system window popped up, showing his unique trait, Blood Berserker, which gave him a buff after drinking demon blood but caused him to lose sanity. Cottam screamed out, finding the situation harsh as he looked at the system description. He was shown in a blur of red energy, intensely focused on the fight. Driven by the urge to escape this world even one day sooner, he pushed himself harder against the monsters. He was determined to kill them all so this damn world would be behind him. In a rage, Cottam was shown biting and consuming the blood of the demons he defeated. He was fully transformed, covered in blood and radiating an intense demonic aura. Cottam was desperate to escape this terrible world as soon as possible. He roared, demanding things happen faster. As the darkness closed in, Cottam stood atop a massive pile of dead demons, still powered by his berserker state. He was nearly overcome by the bloodlust, his features twisted and demonic. A powerful, female-looking demon appeared, charging towards him with sharp claws. The demon looked furious as Cottam's rage seemed to intensify, even in his transformed state. Cottam roared at the demons, fueled by his desperate need to escape. He vowed to devour every last one of them and drink all their blood. He called the demon he was fighting a bitch and promised to drink all her blood too. As Cottam was locked in a brutal struggle, a blinding light shone down, and his comrades called out to him. Melissa and others yelled for Sir Cottam to snap out of it and stop. Cottam was barely able to recognize Melissa through his blood-crazed eyes and distorted face. Melissa looked up at him, her face full of worry, whispering his name. As Cotton began to succumb to the power, golden restraints appeared, trying to hold him back while Melissa was pushed away. He managed to faintly say Melissa's name, seeing his corrupted face. He extended a bloody hand, seemingly trying to reach out or stop what was happening. A thought flashed, no way, as the system window reminded him of the curse of losing sanity from drinking demon blood. Cotton realized with horror that he was reaching the point where he couldn't even recognize his own comrades. The in-game description about losing sanity now felt like a real madness consuming his mind. He was submerged in blood, and what was once disgusting now tasted sweet to him. The bloodlust and thirst for blood were overwhelming, making it hard to keep control. He worried if he could even stay sane until they defeated the great demon. He knew if he went insane, everything would be lost, so he resolved to kill the great demon first. His rage intensified, wanting to kill and devour every single demon, including the one Melissa was near. Melissa was clinging to him, trying to hold him back from losing control completely. Cotton managed to comfort Melissa, telling her he was fine and not to blame herself. Melissa then declared that since Cotton protected them all this time, it was now their turn to protect him. Gordon called out to Sir Cotton as the party gathered around him. Gordon promised that he and Cyril would help Cotton fight the madness, urging him to fight to protect himself. Gordon cheerfully told Cotton not to worry, saying he would physically beat him back to his senses if needed. Cotton asked if everyone was rested and ready to move out to face the great demon. Gale stood ready, looking towards Cotton, who was still recovering while being held by Melissa. Gale reaffirmed their mission. They had to defeat the great demon together and save the world. Cotton and Melissa stood together, looking utterly exhausted but united after the tough fight. Cotton let out a small sound as he straightened up. Together, the party moved forward, their bodies and minds worn out from the struggle. Finally, after all that struggle, the end seemed near. Gale looked on in shock as the monstrous Cotton raised his weapon for a final blow against the great demon. The great demon was struck with immense force, causing a powerful visual reaction. The demon was violently thrown back by Cotton's incredible strength. Cotton unleashed a final, massive, circular attack of light and fire. The attack engulfed the remaining demonic forms surrounding the great demon. Gale sighed in relief, thinking, "Oh, finally the fight was over." The great demon's head was blasted off, leaving only a dark, dripping void. The shockwave of the final blow rippled outward. The remnants of the great demon were swept away by the lingering energy. A final sigh of release seemed to come from the environment. Melissa stood amidst the wreckage, looking around the desolate, broken landscape, asking if it was truly over. Cotton's large, armored hand gently placed itself on Melissa's shoulder. Gordon confirmed that by Elga's grace, it seemed the fight was indeed finished. Melissa, looking bewildered, questioned what was happening, her eyes wide. The light of the new reality started to break through the darkness. Gale and the others looked around the strange, brightened terrain, asking what was going on. Cyril, looking completely broken and blindfolded, cried out, asking where Sir Cotton had gone. A silhouette, clearly Cotton, walked away towards a bright portal, his massive axe left behind. Gale shouted desperately for Cotton to stop. Cotton paused, a series of dots showing his inner thought process. He stood before the glowing exit, a dark silhouette against the intense light. Cotton looked back one last time with a soft expression. He thought that it was an honor to fight alongside them in person, not just as a player watching from a screen. He gave a small, sad smile. He called them my comrades and reached out his armored hand toward the exit light while a faint silhouette walked away. Gale shouted Cotton, "No!" trying to stop him from entering the portal. The portal glowed brilliantly as Cotton stepped towards it. Cyril was left behind, her hand weakly outstretched as Cotton moved away. The sound effects emphasized the force and finality of the moment. Cotton's boots left the ground as he passed through the exit. Cyril, now sitting down, murmured Cotton's name as the light of the portal faded. Cyril sat broken, her eyes covered, but a small, resigned smile on her face. The surroundings completely faded to white and then black. Cotton's boots were seen stepping onto a dark surface, following a trail of faint glowing footprints. Cotton stood fully visible in the dark, his muscular body scarred but whole. He thought that nothing had changed. It was the same darkness as when he first crossed over into the game. He wondered what to do first when he got back to his real life. He decided the first things first would be a cold beer, then sleeping like a log, vowing never to play that medieval fantasy game again. He felt bad about not saying a proper goodbye to his comrades, but he had to accept reality. He would never see them again. Cotton thought that Cotton, the great warrior of Atala, was now gone forever. He looked at the glowing square ahead, which was the exit back to his reality. He realized that crossing the door meant freedom, but then a sudden shock hit him. He laughed maniacally, realizing this couldn't be happening and that it must be a dream. A bright, cross-shaped light erupted in front of him. Cotton started laughing, a wide, crazed smile spreading across his face. He burst into loud laughter, his body straining with the force of it. The light from the exit grew brighter as the world around him dissolved into blackness. Cotton laughed as he walked away from the light, while faint silhouettes of his comrades remained behind. He said a final, drawn-out ha as the words NEW Game Plus appeared in glowing text. The screen confirmed his fate, restarting the game. The sky was clear blue with white, fluffy clouds floating around. A group of prisoners, including a very muscular man and an old man, are being marched down a dirt road by soldiers carrying spears. A soldier in shining silver armor, sitting on a white horse, leads the procession, looking serious. Focus shifted to a pair of hands tightly bound with heavy metal shackles, suggesting someone was in custody. More close-up shots showed the soldiers guarding a wooden cart, emphasizing the tense atmosphere around the prisoners. One of the prisoners started yelling loudly, proclaiming his innocence and blaming the baker's son for a murder. The old man, also in chains, insisted he only stole a small bronze ring and had no idea a silver necklace was involved. A soldier shouted at the prisoners to keep quiet, showing annoyance at their complaints. The soldier found their chatter bothersome, but then one of the prisoners started pleading with a soldier. The prisoner, who was yelling about the necklace, muttered in annoyance while looking at the pleading man. The pleading prisoner begged a soldier, claiming he was framed because he never sold any demonic byproducts. An annoyed soldier asked the merchant what he wanted now, impatiently. The merchant insisted someone must have planted the demonic items to take credit for the capture himself. He desperately asked to meet the person who inspected his bag, as he believed someone was setting him up. A soldier looked sternly at the merchant, thinking about how even a young knight's reputation was on the line if this was a setup. The soldier internally scoffed at the idea of such a young person pulling this stunt, but respected that a holy knight is still a holy knight. That same soldier then looked up at the holy knight on horseback, acknowledging his rank despite his youth. If the soldier messed up this situation, his own head was on the line, leading to a menacing look from his side. The soldier angrily questioned if the merchant dared to doubt a holy knight of Elga. The merchant quickly denied doubting the knight, and the soldier told him to return to his spot, promising release if innocent. The merchant sighed in relief and accepted the order, walking back while the soldiers observed. One soldier thought it was a shame that the merchant was unlikely to survive since a holy knight was directly involved in his capture. The soldier hoped the merchant would have a better status in his next life before turning his attention to the bigger captive. Putting the merchant aside, the soldier wondered how they even managed to catch that massive barbarian. Meanwhile, the extremely muscular barbarian chained at the hands stood silently. The focus dropped to the barbarian's chains and then the merchant standing nearby. The barbarian's internal thoughts started, realizing this body felt familiar, but all his previous power was gone. He noted that the madness and guilt that ate away at his mind had also vanished. A title card appeared, indicating Chapter 2. The second playthrough after clearing the game, as the scene moved to a bright, open field. The muscular barbarian stood among the prisoners and guards, looking around with intensity. He looked up at the sky, wondering aloud what in the world was going on. The barbarian observed his chained hands, feeling this body was familiar, but all the power he built up before was gone. A shadowy vision of two figures, one monstrous, flashed in his mind, quickly followed by a fast movement graphic. He remembered a message saying New Game Plus, making him think he must have started the game over. He did not understand this, as in reality, the game never started this way before. The barbarian closed his eyes for a moment, still trying to process the situation under the bright sky. A voice called out to him from the side as he looked up. The old man, looking up at the massive barbarian, showed him something. The old man offered him a small root-like item, telling him to chew it while they walked, as it would make things less boring. The barbarian took the root, holding it carefully in his chained hands. The barbarian stared intently, possibly recognizing something about the gesture or the item. The old man smiled warmly, explaining that some barbarians helped him a long time ago, and seeing him reminded him of them. He said this was all he had as a small repayment for the past kindness. The barbarian then asked the old man how he got caught. The muscular barbarian replied that he didn't know how he was captured. The old man explained that the holy knights and priests of the empire are very hostile towards heretics. The barbarian looked thoughtful, asking if there was an empire on this continent, as he didn't know about it. The old man expressed surprise that the barbarian did not know of the Lucanian Empire. The barbarian questioned this, remembering Lucanian as a kingdom in the center of the continent, to which the old man replied that they used to call it that a long time ago. He wondered if he had somehow fallen into a parallel world with a slightly different setting. The barbarian then asked the old man where they were all being taken. The old man explained they were likely heading to the empire's capital, the holy capital Lucaon. Once there, the other prisoners and he would be summoned before the judges of Elga. He grimly added that the barbarian would probably face the Inquisition. The barbarian seemed slightly relieved, saying they won't kill him right away, which was a relief. The old man reacted with shock and alarm, demanding what there was to be relieved about, looking very frightened. He warned that the inquisitors were all madmen addicted to torture, and when they see a heretic like him, they treat him like a fun new toy. He described terrible tortures, like driving nails into the gums and pouring molten iron into the nostrils. Suddenly, the holy knight on the horse interrupted everyone with a loud command. The knight aggressively used his lance to strike the old man, who was knocked down hard onto the ground. The old man was clearly hit, looking up in pain as a blue light hit his chest. The knight then shouted for all prisoners to listen, declaring that anyone who insults a knight of Elga must die with death. He paused, a cunning look appearing on his face as he turned his attention to the barbarian. The knight addressed the barbarian directly, asking if he caused the commotion, and suggested he bow and beg for forgiveness to avoid the same fate as the old man. The knight grinned arrogantly, telling the barbarian he might let him live if he begged. The barbarian just stared back with a fierce look, not bowing at all. The knight was enraged by the perceived mockery, calling it blasphemy. He became furious, threatening to pass judgment on the heretical bastard. He yelled that this was blasphemy, despite the barbarian's power. The knight prepared to strike, summoning a blue glowing energy onto his spear as he charged down from his horse. The barbarian watched the incoming attack with focused eyes, a slight smirk forming. The knight looked completely shocked as he saw the barbarian was reacting to his attack. The barbarian raised his chained hands, intercepting the shining spear with his palms. The knight cried out in pain and surprise as the force of the impact pushed him and his horse back. The knight screamed at the barbarian to let go, but the barbarian replied coldly, "Well, if you insist." A close-up on the hands meeting the glowing spear was followed by a massive impact sound as the knight was violently thrown from his horse. The knight was sent flying backwards as he screamed a threat to pass judgment on the heretical bastard. The knight's face showed shock and pain as the blow landed. The barbarian generated a powerful aura as the knight's attack was stopped. The knight was seen reeling back from the barbarian's counter, with the barbarian surrounded by a strong blue glow. A huge explosion of force hit the ground, scattering debris, and the knight was seen tumbling away. More sound effects emphasized the immense shockwave from the clash. The barbarian knelt, breathing heavily, while the knight lay defeated on the ground nearby, his horse also down. The barbarian stared at the fallen knight, silent for a moment, before the knight started to regain his footing. The knight staggered up, calling the barbarian a filthy heretic and demanding to know how he dared to harm a holy knight. Even if he was a rookie, the knight still believed the barbarian's attack wouldn't kill him, while the barbarian internally reflected that he wouldn't be struggling this much if even a low-level demon were present. The tip of the knight's spear was shown, gleaming in the bright sunlight. The knight raised his spear high, shouting his devotion to O Elga, master of eternal light. The barbarian watched the knight prepare his next move with a grim expression. The knight asked Elga to let him strike down this minion of vile demons, preparing to unleash a holy attack. Light poured down on the knight as he declared he would pass judgment upon the heretic in Elga's name. The knight attacked with full force, his face contorted in anger and determination. The glowing spear descended toward the barbarian in a powerful strike. Both figures rushed towards each other in a blur of motion and light. The barbarian raised his hands, realizing with dread, "This is," he concluded in realization, "I can't dodge this." The knight's powered-up attack burst forth in a massive golden light. The force of the blow shattered the barbarian's shackles and the attack hit him directly. A huge impact sound was heard as the attack connected. In the aftermath, the barbarian was lying amidst the wreckage of the cart, the knight standing over him. The barbarian looked up, a blue light glowing on his chest where the blow landed. The knight stood tall over the barbarian, commenting on how the heretic survived that attack. The knight smirked, saying the barbarian's durability was as brutish as he looked. The barbarian thought to himself that even with all his abilities reset, leaving only his unique trait, Blood Berserker, remaining, he was still struggling against this knight. He believed he wouldn't be struggling this much if even a low-level demon were present. He clenched his fists, wondering how he would get out of this sticky situation. Then, the barbarian's eyes widened as he caught a certain smell, looking down toward the broken cart. Beneath the debris of the cart, there was a dark pool of blood. The knight stepped closer to the kneeling barbarian, acknowledging his strength but stating this was as far as he went. He told the barbarian to receive forgiveness from God Elga through his death. The knight's eyes widened in shock as something unexpected happened. Suddenly, the knight cried out, covering his mouth, complaining about a terrible smell. The barbarian let out a sinister chuckle while the knight looked confused and disgusted. The knight was horrified and yelled at the barbarian, asking what was so funny and if he had gone insane before death. The barbarian smiled menacingly, saying that the god Elga they all worship seems to have chosen him, not the rookie holy knight, implying a change in power. An intense tremor shook the ground as the barbarian's power surged, causing earth to explode around him. The barbarian was now holding up a monstrous, bloody head of what looked like a demon or troll. The horrified knight backed away from the gruesome sight. Focus returned to the barbarian's chest, where the blue glow was now much stronger and pulsing. The barbarian's face was shown up close, his eyes now glowing white in the growing red auras surrounding him. The gruesome, bloody head of the defeated monster hung low, covered in dripping blood against a deep red background. The scene starts with a brutal moment where someone is ripping off a monstrous mask, revealing blood and teeth underneath. Blood splatters across a muscular chest, showing the intensity of the recent fight. The powerful figure raises his arms, the mask he just tore off dripping with dark liquid, against a scary red background. The powerful figure, now looking like a barbarian, stands amidst wreckage while a group of armored knights and some villagers watch him nervously. The dust settles around the broken crates and barrels from the fight. One of the observers wonders if the barbarian went crazy after drinking a demon's blood, as he seems too filthy to approach. The main knight in shiny armor raises his spear and points, yelling for one of the ordinary-looking soldiers to take action. The chosen soldier hesitantly asks if the order is for him. The knight firmly tells him to finish off that filthy bastard. The soldier starts moving forward, and the barbarian figure glows with a terrifying red energy, seemingly ready to face the attack. The soldier steels himself, gripping his spear with a nervous expression. Shouting "Die!" the soldier charges forward with his spear aimed at the unarmed and wounded barbarian. A close-up shows the barbarian's intensely powered-up body, glowing red with brute strength. The soldier's attack connects, resulting in a sharp impact sound. More blood sprays as the barbarian violently grabs the soldier's face. The soldier, caught in the barbarian's grip, begins to plead for his life. The barbarian holds the soldier's face, who continues to beg desperately. The soldier's face is contorted in terror as the barbarian crushes his grip around his head. The armored knight watches in shocked disbelief, his hands covering his mouth. The barbarian unleashes a massive, bloody punch that explodes in dark red energy. This power, he concludes, must have come from a lesser demon, only providing a basic strength enhancement. He believes this power should be enough to escape the current situation, thinking it's more than enough. A close-up shows the barbarian's intensely powered-up face, his mouth full of blood and his eyes glowing menacingly red. Intense sound effects emphasize the barbarian's raw power and release of energy. The barbarian lets out a loud roar, his body radiating immense, violent red power. The remaining soldiers look terrified, one gasping and calling the attacker a monster. The soldiers panic, shouting that he is a monster, while the main knight watches from the background. The spears thrown by the soldiers harmlessly clatter onto the dirt ground. Seeing this, some of the surrounding soldiers immediately turn and start running away in fear. However, the main knight in armor shouts for them not to retreat and to form ranks to subdue the prisoner. The knight explains that the target is unarmed and wounded. He then threatens severe punishment under military law for anyone who flees. The knight insists that a few more stabs with a spear should finish off the barbarian. The knight stares intently at the scene, seemingly processing the turn of events. The barbarian suddenly moves with incredible speed, attacking the knight who is caught mid-motion, sending blood flying. The knight is sent flying backward, hitting the ground hard. The knight lies stunned on the ground, realizing the barbarian hit his head, perhaps thinking he was still praying to his god Elga. The knight is shocked to see the barbarian approaching him, still full of terrifying red energy. Close-up shots show the knight's growing panic and wide eyes as the barbarian looms. More shock registers on the knight's face as the barbarian closes the distance with incredible speed against the dramatic sky. The enraged, glowing barbarian charges forward like a terrifying beast. The knight quickly gets into a defensive stance, holding his spear, ready for the impact. The knight shouts a desperate prayer to Elga, master of eternal light, asking to be allowed to cut down this treacherous demon's servant. The knight's face glows intensely with divine or holy light as he prepares his counterattack. The barbarian's attack approaches with blinding light and sound effects, showing an imminent, powerful clash. The scene shows the collision, with the barbarian overwhelming the knight with the force of his strike. The knight cries out for Elga as he seemingly unleashes a final burst of power. A huge explosion of golden or orange light erupts from the impact point between the two fighters. The knight, seemingly victorious or at least surviving the initial blast, smugly declares that this is the end for the barbarian. The knight sneers, telling the barbarian to beg for forgiveness from Elga in the next life, but a distorted, rough voice challenges him. "Hey, greenhorn." The barbarian, standing over the knight, asks, "Is this all you've got?" As the knight groans in pain, the knight lets out a pain sound, "Gah." The barbarian strikes again, driving his fist into the knight's chest area with intense force. The barbarian's fist, glowing red, punches through the knight's chest armor in a brutal, explosive impact. More massive sound effects emphasize the devastating blow. The knight is violently thrown backward, his armor shattering, blood spraying everywhere against the sky. A close-up shows the knight's body tumbling through the air, clearly defeated and covered in blood. Sound effects indicate the force of the blow as the knight flies away. The barbarian stands over the defeated knight, who is clearly finished after being struck down in the field. The barbarian, still powered up in red, tells the defeated knight to stop. The downed knight apologizes, saying, "I was wrong, please." The knight continues pleading, please, while the barbarian stands over him, glowing red. The knight whispers, "Thank you," as the barbarian stands over him, the spear now piercing the knight's body. The barbarian looks down at the defeated knight, calling him ignorant barbarian scum. The barbarian vows revenge, saying, "I'll get you for this, you fucking bastard." The scene shifts to the defeated knight lying on the ground, breathing heavily as the barbarian walks away. A dark panel transitions the scene away from the immediate aftermath of the fight. The barbarian drives the spear deep into the ground, symbolizing finality, while the knight lies defeated nearby. The knight looks up in absolute horror at the approaching barbarian shadow. The knight lets out a final gasp, "Ah." The barbarian mocks the knight for still praying to his god Elga at this moment, while gripping his weapon with glowing hands. More ominous sound effects accompany the barbarian's actions as he prepares the final blow. The barbarian stands tall over the fallen knight, holding the spear that has run him through, radiating menace. The barbarian tells the dying knight he hopes he can be with his damned god in the afterlife too, as the knight weakly tries to protest. The barbarian addresses the knight as a "you reckless whelp of Elga," preparing for the final blow as a huge red force surges. The panel focuses on the spear tip, ready to strike, against the dramatic sky. The barbarian stands over the dead knight, who is impaled by his own spear, while the barbarian's hands show a faint blue glow mixed with the dominant red. A close-up of the barbarian's lower body shows his hands glowing faintly blue while he stands over the body. The barbarian briefly looks toward the remaining villagers who are now running away in panic. The villagers are seen fleeing in terror, screaming, "Run!" The barbarian reflects internally on the lesson from my first playthrough. He crouches down, surrounded by the red aura, remembering that lesson as he prepares to act. The remaining fleeing villagers are shown running for their lives, panting heavily. One of the villagers expresses false hope that they are safe now that they have come this far. Suddenly, one of the leading villagers is impaled through the face by the spear, blood splattering everywhere. The barbarian's internal thought confirms his principle: leave no loose ends. The villagers watch in horror as their leader and another fall dead, pierced by the thrown spear. The remaining terrified villagers try to hide in the nearby bushes, while the barbarian stands in the open. The barbarian looks back with his glowing red eyes, ready to deal with the hidden survivors. He powerfully throws the spear again, this time aiming toward the hiding spot in the trees. The spear hits with massive force, causing the trees to explode outwards, and one of the hiding men cries out in pain. A close-up of one of the hidden men shows the spear having pierced through his head after the initial impact. The barbarian then addresses the next group of people who appear, calling one "Hey, pal," and commenting on how impressive it was watching him kill the Holy Knight. An older man with chains, seemingly the leader of this new group, stands before the barbarian, while others look on in fear. The leader asks the barbarian to get his cuffs off so they can talk, but the barbarian attacks the leader instantly with a massive force explosion. The result of the attack is a massive spray of blood moving towards the viewer at high speed. More dramatic visualization of the blood splatter as the barbarian's strength overwhelms everything. The remaining witnesses look on in sheer terror as the barbarian stands, his core lesson echoing the lesson from my first playthrough. The barbarian slams down with incredible force, demonstrating his power onto the ground near the remaining men. His rule becomes clear: never leave any loose ends. The barbarian prepares to strike the remaining terrified men, radiating intense red power and looking utterly ruthless. The focus shifts to the faces of the remaining terrified men, caught in the aftermath of the barbarian's rampage. A close-up on one man's face shows his eyes wide open in ultimate fear and despair. The captured man cried out, holding up his chained hands in alarm. Someone, whose powerful back was clearly visible, held a long wooden pole threatening the man who begged for mercy. The figure, clad in furs and looking massive, stood over the pleading man while the victim cried out for mercy. Then, the hero, with glowing red eyes, raised his shining weapon, ready for the final strike. He stood there for a moment, silhouetted against the fiery sky, his powerful back facing the viewer. The man stood over the bodies of the soldiers, the setting sun casting a dramatic light on the bloody scene. The focus zoomed in on one of the dead men, showing the brutal end they met. The hero thought about the danger of letting the witnesses alive, realizing that worst-case scenario, a unit of high-ranking holy knights could be sent to pursue him. He concluded that he could not take that risk, gripping his spear tightly. The merchant gasped, clearly terrified as he realized his fate. He slumped down, clutching his head in fear as the atmosphere turned dark around him. The hero let out a shout while the merchant cried out in terror. The large man stood tall with his spear, letting the merchant know that this one would be the last to face his judgment. The hero, covered in blood, looked down, preparing for the final act. He held his weapon, his grip firm as the tension built up. The hero stood over the merchant, who was now kneeling in submission on the ground. The merchant desperately begged for his life, insisting he had done nothing wrong. The hero looked down coldly and asked why he should spare him. The merchant tearfully explained that his wife and child were waiting for him back home. He also claimed he was only captured because he was framed. The hero looked at the man holding a weapon, saying the merchant seemed truly innocent, but the hero stated that being framed was no reason to spare him and told him to just die already. The merchant reacted with pure horror. Suddenly, the hero changed his tone and asked if the man needed a guide. The hero paused, looking surprised by the sudden question. The merchant quickly offered his services as a traveling merchant from Multana, boasting that no one knew the terrain better than him. The hero responded, "Yes, sir." The hero accepted the offer for information, stating that Lucanian in his memory was definitely a kingdom, and then asked about the changes. The merchant looked confused by the question, letting out a questioning sound. The merchant wondered if this barbarian could be from the wastelands beyond the mountain range. He thought that if the hero was from beyond the mountains, contact would have been lost centuries ago. The hero stared at him, implicitly questioning why he didn't know the current state of affairs. The merchant suddenly remembered, stating the current year was 248 of the imperial calendar, meaning it had been about 248 years since the Lucanian Empire was established. An emperor sat on a throne, representing the current imperial power. The merchant confirmed that before it was an empire, it was the Lucanian kingdom. The hero asked for the equivalent year in the old calendar. The merchant admitted they rarely used the old calendar system, guessing it would be around the year 1130. The hero was shocked that the calendar he knew was now considered an old calendar. The hero then demanded to know the current state of the continent, what happened to the Elga faith, and about the demon realm. The merchant explained that Lucanian had unified the continent about 300 years ago. Now, the continent was effectively divided into three major powers. The merchant illustrated this division on a map. He explained that the Elga faith took the opportunity of an outbreak to expand its power and become what it is now, showing the faith and the fiery demon realm. As for the demon realm, the merchant stated that no one who had gone there had ever returned alive. The hero reacted with shock, exclaiming that he was told no one had returned alive from the demon realm. The hero then asked if the merchant had heard of names like Gael, Melissa, Gordon, and Cyril, showing visions of his past comrades. He stared intently at the merchant, asking if these names rang a bell. The merchant nervously said he had not heard those names. Then, the merchant suddenly recalled the name Melissa, looking shocked. He felt like he had heard the name Melissa or Alyssa before, associating it with heroes who defeated the great demon. The hero was in disbelief that the heroes who conquered the demon realm were forgotten, wondering if this world was truly a continuation of his first playthrough. He closed his eyes in deep thought, questioning why demons were running wild if this was a continuation. The hero asked the merchant why demons were rampant on the continent. The merchant could only say no one knew the answer, sharing rumors that some blamed divine punishment from Elga, others blamed a mad archmage opening a gate to another world, and some spoke of a terrible evil descending. The narration concluded that the truth lies only behind the eyelids of the Almighty God above the clouds. The hero looked up at the clouds, realizing the merchant's words confirmed his suspicions about the current state of the world. The merchant was sweating nervously as the hero seemed lost in thought, gazing at the fiery sky. The hero looked down, his expression grim, as the scene implied a decision was being made. The hero turned to the merchant, who looked utterly confused by the hero's sudden shift in demeanor. The hero then walked away, looking out over the vast, grassy landscape under the colorful sky. Based on what the traveling merchant was saying, the hero concluded that this place was probably the continent, about 300 years after the first playthrough. He reflected on how he was kicked out of his original world, and now he's been kicked out of the world he managed to reach, feeling his knowledge is outdated. He mourned that his comrades from the first playthrough, like Gale, Melissa, and Gordon, were long dead, mere dust in this era. Looking at the ground, he considered the pointless repetition of slaughter. He pictured the gruesome deaths of his former enemies, asking if there was any reason to live on, drinking disgusting demon blood and suppressing the madness. He questioned what guarantee there was that he could return to reality when he reached the ending once more. He worried that even if he finished this time, he might just be thrown into yet another new game plus. The thought of an endless loop of games made him tense up. The hero gripped his weapon, determined that if he had to start this journey again, countless lingering attachments would remain, so ending it here and now was better. The merchant looked up, utterly baffled by the hero's dark monologue. The hero held the tip of his weapon near his own chest, ready to finish things. The merchant shouted in alarm, asking what the hero was trying to do. The hero explained that if he were to start this journey again, countless lingering attachments would remain, so if he's to meet his end, there is no better time than now. He looked up one last time, hoping what he faced after death wasn't a room labeled game over. The tip of the weapon touched his skin, just as a memory of a conversation flashed in his mind. The memory showed someone asking what he would do after defeating the great demon, and the answer was to teach mages and build a tower. He recalled the conversation, the thought of a future plan making him pause his self-destruction. The hero remembered the image of the girl who spoke about building a tower. The girl in his memory mentioned teaching mages and building a tower. He remembered the merchant confirming that Melissa was the name of the first master of the mage tower. The hero snapped out of his memories, realizing he couldn't just die yet. He questioned the merchant about Melissa again, asking if that was the name. The merchant hesitantly confirmed the name, adding that he thought Melissa was the first master of the mage tower. The hero immediately demanded to know where the mage tower was located. The merchant explained the mage tower was in Vistana, on the eastern edge of the Free Cities Alliance, which meant it would take at least 2 months to reach from their current location in the Empire's territory. The hero looked determined, and the merchant looked worried about the long journey ahead. The hero gave a slight, grim smile, deciding against ending his life. He inwardly cursed that someone wouldn't even let him die in peace, looking at the image of the smiling girl from his memory. He commanded the merchant to guide him to the mage tower by the fastest route. The merchant panicked, pleading that he had a family to take care of. The hero dismissed the merchant's concern about wasting time, stating that he would give him the most precious thing he could. The merchant nervously asked what precious payment he would receive. The hero told him to find the key, get his cuffs off, grab what he needed, and they would leave immediately, stating the payment was his life. The merchant understood and agreed to the terms. The hero instructed the merchant to find the key and prepare to leave immediately. Then they walked off, leaving the broken chains behind. The merchant, now carrying a large pack, followed behind the hero, noting that the dropped spear looked usable. The hero picked up his sword, thinking it would be serviceable, maybe even forgeable into something decent when he used his unique trait. He considered the Holy Knight's spear, which was the most tempting weapon. He sighed, wishing he could have brought the axe he used in his first playthrough, but was at least glad he was still alive. The merchant followed behind, still carrying his heavy bag, wondering what the master was doing. A gruesome scene unfolded below the merchant as a monster's head with a long tongue appeared, indicating immediate danger. The hero was seen strapping the sword he acquired to his waist. The hero simply stated, "Then let's go." The hero, now with a sword strapped to his waist, stood tall, looking forward, with the merchant looking up in fear. They headed towards the mage tower, moving across the plain. The hero walked ahead with purpose, while the merchant followed slowly, carrying a large red backpack. The hero stood in the foreground as they traveled across the plain under the colorful sky. The scene shifted to a gray, ominous sky. Crows filled the sky, circling above the area where the previous battle took place, focusing on the sword sticking out near a fallen body. A close-up showed several ominous-looking crows with red eyes, observing the scene of the massacre. A new group of holy knights arrived, one looking down at the dead body of Linton Pelopus. Another knight stated that everyone, soldier and prisoner, seemed to have been massacred. The first knight asked Lady Helia what they should do now, as they couldn't just report Linton's death to the Archbishop. Lady Helia, a blonde knight in white and gold armor, looked sternly ahead. She instructed Eden to find any clue, stating they couldn't return to the Archbishop yet. Eden understood, while Lady Helia scoffed at Linton, calling him an idiot. Lady Helia looked angry, wondering what kind of bastards dared to kill a holy knight. She looked down at the slain Linton Pelopus, noting that he was one of the Archbishop's men. She declared that even though she didn't know what kind of trash they were, they would pay the price. Lady Helia's angry face showed her intent for swift and harsh revenge. The night was dark under the glowing moon hidden by clouds. They were traveling through a dense forest with tall, dark trees surrounding them. The barbarian, who had been resting, was near a small, intensely glowing red campfire. The red campfire embers glowed intensely, radiating heat from the burned wood. The merchant lay sleeping near his red backpack, while the barbarian rested nearby. The merchant's belongings lay close by, the small fire still burning brightly. Suddenly, the merchant awoke with a sharp gasp, the forest around him seeming to blur as he moved quickly. His reaction was immediate and panicked, indicated by the rapid blurring lines around him. The merchant let out a sound of distress as he ran through the trees. He thought to himself that he had finally gotten away, and he needed to put as much distance between himself and the other man as possible. He kept running in terror, terrified of what would happen if he stopped. The merchant recalled that he felt it was dangerous to escape the empire alone, so getting a traveling companion was a good idea at first. Below him, the huge barbarian stood, his presence intimidating the few people near him. But the real issue was that this companion would eat a demon's corpse and single-handedly slaughter dozens of people. The merchant's mind flashed to an image of the barbarian-looking savage, covered in blood with glowing red eyes and fangs. Thinking about the past few days, the merchant tried to offer the barbarian some jerky and dried potatoes. He then tried to be helpful, offering to make a warm fire while the barbarian lay down to rest. The merchant then hesitated to ask about the barbarian's past in the empire and decided to stay quiet. He observed that this barbarian hardly spoke and didn't allow any questions unless they were really important. No matter how much the merchant watched him, he couldn't guess what the barbarian was thinking. He seemed more like a wild beast than a person. Every day felt like a risky performance, but the merchant thought he could have endured that if it was the only problem. However, the merchant was stressed, and in the next moment, he was shown running away from the barbarian who was still setting up camp. The barbarian looked back at the merchant with a calm but intense gaze. The barbarian simply stated, "You're slow," revealing that the bigger problem was the barbarian's unbelievable marching speed. The merchant explained that even though he was a traveling merchant known for being quick and never tiring, he couldn't keep up. As soon as the merchant pointed the way, the barbarian was far ahead. When the merchant finally caught up, the barbarian would just say one word and leave again, then glare at him until he arrived, as if threatening to hurt him if he was late. The barbarian looked stoic, with a powerful physique. The merchant was convinced that if he wasn't the guide, they would already be miles apart, feeling like the barbarian's legs were made of steel. The merchant felt he was close to a nervous breakdown from keeping up with that pace, and that he was going to die if he continued. He decided he had to escape somehow, completely exhausted. He thought he had to run away to be free. A black and white rushing effect dominated the screen before settling on a dark forest scene under a bright moon. The merchant gasped again as he ran, looking back at the vast forest area. He felt his chance had come sooner than expected now that he was out of the dark forest. He ran further, thinking the barbarian wouldn't know which way he went. The merchant was relieved, but then remembered his bag, which held his whole fortune. The bag contained valuable items like oil, candles, soap, food, and an antique ring, enough to start a stall in the city. He worried that going back for it might wake the sleeping beast, but decided his life was more important than the bag. He kept running, not knowing where he was, but hoping the barbarian would take time to figure out where he went. The merchant paused, out of breath, under the night sky. He thought he succeeded, that he was finally free, but then a voice made him freeze as he realized he was not free at all. The barbarian stood there, asking how far the merchant was rushing off to with such haste. The merchant was completely shocked and muttered, "Huh." The large barbarian, looking intimidating, asked if the merchant was running away. He continued to question why the merchant was running, asking if he didn't need the promised payment. The merchant stammered that it wasn't that, but something else entirely. He cried out that he had committed a crime worthy of death, sir. The merchant begged forgiveness, remembering how the barbarian had shown mercy by saving his life earlier. The barbarian stopped him, saying he didn't want an apology, but a reason. He demanded an explanation, asking why the merchant ran away, warning that he would just run again if the reason wasn't fixed this once. The terrified merchant started to explain, while the barbarian waited, looking serious. The barbarian demanded to know the reason for running, warning that he would just run away again if the reason wasn't fixed. The terrified merchant started to explain, beginning with WLI. He explained that following at that speed made him feel like he would just collapse and die. The merchant felt he was surely a dead man now, sweating profusely. The barbarian paused, then calmly said, "Let's go back." The merchant was shocked by this sudden change in tone. The barbarian then promised, "From now on, I'll walk a little slower," making the merchant even more confused. The screen was black for a moment. The merchant looked around with confusion and worry. They were back at the campsite, with the fire burning strongly again in the dark forest. The merchant was shown waking up with a painful cry, while the barbarian sat nearby. The merchant quickly tried to deny whatever the barbarian might have thought he was saying in his sleep. The barbarian thought to himself that his hurried pace was a habit from his first playthrough. He recalled that in the demon realm, every moment felt like being chased and urgent because the place was barren and hostile. In that terrible place, there was never enough food or water and rest was rare. Below, a flashback showed a horrifying scene in the red-lit demon realm where the barbarian was transformed and seemed to have defeated others. He remembered that since he advanced by drinking demon blood, he never knew when he would be consumed by madness. The barbarian recalled how he and his comrades would save every moment, even from eating and sleeping, just to hasten their steps. Then he exhaled slowly. He realized that unlike the demon realm, their current surroundings weren't that dangerous. There was plenty of food and water, and while the madness might return someday, at least for now, it was not a problem. He sat looking up at the sky. The barbarian decided that since a reason to slow down had appeared, he should use the traveling merchant's skills. The merchant, pointing somewhere, was now explaining that there was a lot of friction around the border. The merchant suggested taking a detour through a less guarded area instead of the main route. The barbarian agreed, saying, "If you say so," and the merchant seemed relieved to make a decision. He confirmed that he could guide them. Of course, the merchant added that he had a map of the continent in his head, but it was from over 300 years ago. Without a competent guide, he would surely lose his way. The merchant explained that most holy knights were busy capturing heretics or hunting demons obsessively. He finished by saying a barbarian like the one beside him couldn't rest easy until they reached the Free Cities Alliance territory. The barbarian realized this was why he hadn't run into many demons, despite hearing they were everywhere, and he took a drink from his flask. He then thought that the blood he had would soon be unusable. This meant he'll need to find some fresh blood just in case. They were traveling under the night sky with a crescent moon visible through the trees. The merchant suddenly noticed something and pointed, asking the barbarian, "There's a village." They looked down at a small cluster of wooden houses surrounded by a simple wooden fence. The merchant observed that it looked like a pioneer settlement and suggested they ask for food and a place to stay for the night. The barbarian looked serious, suggesting they go and check it out first. The merchant found it strange that there wasn't a single light on, even though it was dinner time. He exclaimed in surprise, and then noted that the gate was open with no guards. The barbarian wondered if it was an abandoned village, but said they wouldn't know until they checked. The merchant was worried, asking if the barbarian was really going to check inside. He panicked, asking what if monsters or demons had appeared and everyone fled. The merchant exclaimed in disbelief that the barbarian was just going in like that. The scene showed the dark, quiet village structures with some effects implying movement or tension. The barbarian looked determined, holding his sword, while the merchant looked anxious behind him. The barbarian responded coolly, saying, "Monsters or demons, you say," as he gripped his sword tighter. He raised his large sword toward the starry night sky with a determined look. The barbarian held his large sword up, still looking determined. He gave a fierce, knowing smile, seemingly excited by the potential danger, and stated, "That's welcome news." The night was dark over the rugged landscape as the main character and his companion approached a small settlement. The towering, muscular man walked forward, his companion trailing nervously behind him, looking at the quiet village ahead. The companion wondered aloud if anyone was home, noting that the place did not look completely abandoned yet. He then noticed something odd. Only one door was left open in the otherwise quiet village structures. The powerful warrior paused, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword as he considered the situation. His sharp eyes scanned the area, suggesting he was ready for anything. The follower asked why the sir had stopped, clearly anxious about the lack of noise and the open door. As the companion thought more about it, he realized that only this particular door was open, which seemed suspicious. Suddenly, something moved quickly in the darkness, followed by a sharp, violent sound. An aggressive, green-skinned goblin with red eyes lunged forward, wielding a crude weapon. The powerful warrior reacted instantly, as the intense glow of his power seemed to momentarily blind the attacker. The goblin's attack was met with the intense gaze and focused energy of the main character. With amazing speed, the warrior struck the attacking goblin, spilling dark blood. The first goblin was sent flying backwards from the force of the blow, its momentum stopping abruptly. The companion cried out in fear as he stumbled back from the gruesome scene of the fallen monster. Below, the severed foot of another monster twitched on the ground as the fight continued. More heavily built, aggressive goblins, armed with clubs and axes, were revealed, crowding the small space. The companion recognized these monsters and got scared, realizing there were more goblins attacking, but the warrior knew something important. He explained that goblins in this world are usually shy and avoid people. Since these goblins were acting so aggressive, the warrior deduced that some powerful entity must have caused this change. He felt they were in the right location for whatever they were looking for. His eyes hardened with resolve, confirming that this dangerous place was exactly where they needed to be. A sound rang out as the chapter title card appeared briefly. A sharp, terrifying screech echoed through the air. One of the large goblins rushed in, swinging a heavy club, full of rage. The main character met the charge with a blindingly fast sword swing, enveloped in blue light. The powerful slash cut through the air with incredible force. The remaining goblins looked on in shock and confusion as their comrade was being dealt with. The warrior pulled back his sword, readying for the next attack. Another goblin screamed in terror as it charged in with a knife. The warrior executed another wide, sweeping arc with his glowing blade. The swing was so fast that the goblin was a mere blur as it was struck. The powerful blow connected, and the warrior let out a loud roar of effort. The goblin with the club hesitated, seeing the fate of its ally, while the warrior prepared another move. He swiftly drove his sword into the chest of the second attacking goblin. The wounded goblin looked down at the blade sticking out of it in disbelief. It let out a final, agonizing scream as it collapsed, covered in blood. A surge of dark, red energy erupted from the fallen goblin as the warrior stood ready. The warrior stepped over the defeated creature, his massive form dominating the scene. The companion, visibly shaken, asked if they were all dead now, pointing to the corpses on the ground. The warrior seemed unconvinced. The companion asked if the fight was over, but the warrior replied that he wasn't sure yet. Suddenly, a new monstrous cry arose and a massive hand grabbed the companion's collar. The green hand belonged to a very large goblin who was making muffled sounds, perhaps from being choked or surprised. The huge goblin was clearly guarding something, but the companion saw a small figure and exclaimed in surprise about a little girl. The focus was on the small girl, who was trying to hide or was being held by the large goblin, while another monster roared in fury. The enraged goblin loomed over the scene, its mouth wide open. The warrior's bloody sword was poised, ready to strike again. The warrior, with the small girl somewhat protected behind him, drove his sword deep into the monster's chest. The goblin shuddered violently as the sword handle rested on its forehead, blood pouring from its eyes and mouth. As the large goblin finally fell, the companion was knocked backwards by the sheer force of the battle. The warrior stood over the slain monsters while the companion, recovering, asked what the warrior would have done if he had accidentally hit the child. The warrior just grimaced. The warrior assured him that such an accident would not have happened, as he carefully managed the fight, restraining one of the monsters before it could attack the child. The warrior turned his attention to the little girl, addressing her directly and stating he had some questions. The little girl looked up, tears streaming down her face, as the warrior intensified his serious gaze, causing a loud scream from someone nearby, likely the companion. The companion tried to calm the girl, offering her a piece of dried licorice root, saying it was sweet to suck on and that the monsters were gone now. The girl tentatively took the root and began to suck on it, showing a flicker of relief or distraction. The companion offered the toy rabbit as well, promising to find her mommy and daddy as the warrior observed them. The companion remarked that the warrior was good with children, which made the warrior recall his own son of a similar age. The little girl then mumbled about her mommy and daddy. The warrior, seemingly affected by the girl's words, just remained silent for a moment before she continued to speak about her parents. The companion was taken aback when the girl mentioned her parents, quickly agreeing to help her find them. The little girl sadly mentioned that her mommy and daddy had abandoned her, while the warrior showed a slight sign of realization. The warrior looked on with a sudden realization, as the companion also showed a look of shock. The companion questioned the girl, realizing that the people who tied her up must have been the villagers themselves. The warrior understood the grim truth. The villagers were responsible for the girl's plight. A woman rushed forward, crying out for Lenny, and embracing the child as the warrior watched impassively. Other villagers emerged, some shouting for the mother to come back, while another questioned if the mother was going crazy. Someone tried to calm the crowd, worried about any remaining goblins, as the mother wept with relief while hugging her child, who whispered, "Mommy." The mother, overwhelmed with emotion, thanked them profusely, crying tears of joy and gratitude. The villagers stared at the pile of dead goblins, one of them demanding to know what had happened and questioning if the warrior was responsible for the massacre. A man holding a torch looked intensely at the warrior, asking if he did all of this. The warrior simply replied, "No," as he pulled his sword out of the goblin's head with a sickening sound. The warrior then asserted that it was his sword that did the killing. He told the villagers that he knew their story was predictable, but he wanted to hear it anyway. He was specifically interested in why they were offering their own children as sacrifices to a demon. The villagers looked down in shame and silence as the warrior demanded an explanation. One of the villagers began to explain that this forest was originally full of goblins, but they set fire to the area and settled there because their old land's soil was worn out. He continued that when the fire started, most goblins fled, but then something strange began to happen. The remaining goblins in the forest suddenly became very aggressive and started attacking the villagers. The attacks became so fierce that the number of casualties kept increasing, forcing the villagers to fight back with the able-bodied men to exterminate the goblins. They gathered their men to fight, but they were met by the powerful demon and its horde in a dark cave entrance. The villager admitted that they were not strong enough to fight the demon and its goblins. He paused, indicating they saw something terrifying. He confessed that unable to win, they surrendered to the demon. He then described the demon's mercy, or lack thereof. The demon didn't kill them, but instead, it made a terrible demand for the following week. The demon told them that next week, it would visit their village. The decree was to offer the most useless child from every household as a sacrifice. The warrior reacted in shock, realizing that this meant the other children had already been taken. He angrily asked if the villagers were insane to do this to young children. The villager, now defensive, shot back, asking who else they were supposed to sacrifice, suggesting their grown sons or marriageable daughters. Another villager argued that they were simple farmers and should have just left the land. The first villager retorted that finding a new settlement wasn't easy, as they had already planted their crops, and leaving now meant starvation. In response to their desperate excuses, the warrior violently smashed his fist down on the table, silencing them all. The warrior then turned his focus back to the crucial detail, asking the villager how many horns the demon had on its head. The villager looked confused, asking about horns. The warrior stated that the demon they saw did not have any horns, which seemed to confirm something for him. Satisfied with that answer, the warrior told the villager, "Good," and then commanded someone to lead the way. The villagers looked up, confused, asking where they were supposed to lead him. The warrior stated clearly where they were going. He instructed them to lead the way to the demon's lair. The warrior's intense expression showed his unwavering determination to confront the source of the problem. The man confirmed that the creature they were looking for did not have horns, making it seem like a lesser demon. Since it lacked any distinguishing features, the fighter wondered if it was a very old type of demon, but figured it should not be too hard to handle. The fighter gave a simple affirmation, then grabbed his weapon, ready to go. He then told the villagers to lead the way, making the villagers question where they were going. The fighter responded with a simple "Where do you think?" as he stood there powerfully. He stood there ready, looking imposing with his axe and sword strapped to him. He stated that the demon was inside the cave they were standing in front of. The fighter let out a small grunt as he prepared himself for the fight ahead. This was the title card for Chapter 7 of the Berserker's second playthrough. The scene focused on a brightly burning torch held up high against the dark sky. The torchlight illuminated the faces of the fighter and the merchant guiding him as they approached the cave. The merchant nervously told the fighter that they had nothing to offer as payment for his help. He explained that the entire village was barely surviving as it was, but the fighter insisted he was doing it because he needed to, so no payment was necessary. The merchant was very relieved and thanked the mercenary deeply. The fighter then said he would take the merchant's axe instead, mentioning he only had one weapon. The merchant agreed, telling him to take it if he wanted, as the fighter picked up the axe. They had arrived at the cave entrance, where the demon was hiding inside. The other villagers stood behind, holding their own torches, looking nervous while the fighter led the way. The fighter paused, his expression serious as he took in the surroundings before entering. The merchant nervously suggested they go back and wait instead. The merchant worried that the goblins might suddenly attack the village while they were gone, but the fighter quickly dismissed this idea. The fighter sharply questioned if the villagers only came to act as guides, calling cowards a hindrance on the battlefield and telling the traveling merchant he would come along. The fighter told the merchant that he needed someone to hold the torch to light the way while he fought the demon, making the merchant uneasy about being chosen. The merchant looked shocked, wondering if this was really what he signed up for as the fighter stood ready at the cave mouth. The merchant held the torch steady, its light showing the rough interior of the cave. The muscular fighter stood firm, ready to enter the darkness with his sword in hand. The merchant asked the fighter why he wasn't blaming or scolding the villagers who ran away. The fighter explained that they were cowards who offered their own children to a demon instead of trying to save them, then asked the merchant if he had ever faced a living demon. The merchant admitted he had never faced a living demon, only seen corpses at the black market. The fighter then stated that a human who faces a demon face to face is never the same again, as their noble way of living is broken. The image showed a terrifying, red, sharp-toothed demon face surrounded by screaming, tormented human faces. The fighter continued, saying that after such an encounter, only fear and the craving for survival remain, and one cannot expect courage from ordinary people, though a few might overcome that fear. The merchant found it hard to believe people would offer their own children as sacrifices, noting that even beasts value their young. The fighter replied that sometimes, to survive, people have to go through muck and swallow filth, and since the villagers chose that for their own survival, they couldn't be blindly condemned. The fighter pointed out that the villagers claimed they had no other choice, but he felt that from the children's point of view, it must feel like the whole world abandoned them. He then wondered aloud about the meaning of a life saved by abandoning one's humanity. The merchant hesitantly called out to the fighter, noticing his strange tone. The fighter reflected internally, feeling his perception warped after everything he'd been through, wading through a sea of blood to get back to reality, wondering if a traveling merchant in a game had better morals than him and if he could live a proper life if he returned. The fighter's intense, shadowed face was overlaid by the silhouette of a figure in glasses, suggesting an internal struggle or memory. The fighter broke from his thoughts, asking the merchant if he had said something wrong, as the merchant looked on in shock. The merchant quickly changed the subject, asking if the kidnapped children were still alive. The fighter explained that if the demon were less cunning, it would have killed the children. However, if it was a cunning and wicked demon, it would have kept them alive, which confused the merchant, who thought the opposite was true. The merchant suddenly saw something and exclaimed for the fighter to look out. The fighter turned with a serious look, raising the axe high. The merchant cried out in alarm as action seemed to start. The fighter reacted swiftly, moving with incredible speed. The merchant screamed in terror as the sound effects showed immediate, violent action. A powerful, sweeping motion with a weapon was shown. The axe connected forcefully, showing the impact on the enemy. The fighter looked confused for a moment, while the merchant held the torch up. The impact hit something low to the ground, making a thudding sound on the rocky floor. A heavy, fat goblin let out a painful sound as the axe struck its head. The merchant gasped, realizing they were fighting goblins now, as more red-eyed creatures appeared from the shadows. More goblins roared as they rushed forward, surrounding the area. The fighter moved, covered in blood, as he powerfully attacked the advancing horde. The merchant was terrified by the sudden swarm of goblins, but the fighter calmly told him to keep shining the torch on them. The fighter stamped his foot and moved forward, ready to fight. A goblin expressed surprise, seeming to notice the fighter was not a simple villager. The fighter shouted a name, perhaps Kihet, as he swung his weapon down violently, causing a bloody impact. The fighter gripped the weapon tightly as he engaged another enemy. He blocked a grab with sheer strength, the force echoing through the cavern. The fighter roared as he slammed his weapon into an enemy. The sword flashed brilliantly, followed by a close-up of the fighter's determined face. The fighter observed the stalagmites around them. He noted that these stalagmites made it hard to swing his sword widely, just as the angry goblins started making noises. The fighter swiftly switched weapons, grabbing the axe with a strong grip, ready for the incoming horde. He faced the charging goblins, covered in blood from the fight, ready to swing the axe. A powerful, fast movement indicated a swing coming from the weapon in his hand. The axe cleaved through the air, connecting with the goblin in a very bloody strike. The fighter continued his brutal assault, bathed in red light and goblin blood. He leaned into a powerful, bloody strike, his muscles strained. The fighter caught his breath, slightly splattered with blood, as the immediate danger of the goblins seemed to be dealt with. The merchant looked on in awe at the slaughter, noting the fighter seemed to be using the axe as well. The axe was brought down with great force onto a goblin's head. The fighter swung with everything he had, surrounded by the green-skinned horde. More brutal strikes rained down on the remaining goblins. The goblins were dispatched one by one, ending up defeated on the floor. The fighter's boot stood over the defeated head of a goblin. The merchant let out a groan, clearly overwhelmed by the carnage. The merchant looked around at the huge pile of slain goblins and explained in disbelief how the fighter managed all of this alone. More of the defeated goblins were visible, their red eyes staring blankly as a new, louder roar was heard. The remaining, larger goblins tried to run away, prompting the merchant to point it out. The fighter decided they needed to pursue the fleeing goblins, expecting them to lead back to the main demon. The fighter, covered in blood, led the way while the wide-eyed merchant followed closely, holding the torch. They moved deeper into the cavern, the torchlight barely cutting through the dark. The merchant stayed close to the fighter as they walked through the eerie, dripping cavern. As they moved on, the merchant noted that the narrow path had opened into a wide space which felt strangely carved out. The fighter paused, noticing the unnatural shape of the cave walls around them. A faint green mist or aura surrounded the fighter as he took in the new area. A sinister chuckle echoed, and the fighter warned the merchant to be careful because a real demon was nearby. The fighter instructed the merchant to stay close enough to provide light but not to run, or the goblins might track him easily. He added that if only a few enemies approached, the torchlight should be enough to ward them off, as the fighter himself spotted a menacing, shadowy figure in the distance. The fighter focused intensely, preparing for a serious confrontation as his energy seemed to surge. He moved with immense speed, leaving the merchant behind. The fighter brought down the axe in a massive, bloody arc against whatever was in front of him. The fighter stood ready with his sword, looking up at a large, red, horned demon that was looming over him. The merchant cried out in panic, seeing the true demon appear. The red demon spoke, saying it hadn't seen the fighter before and realizing he wasn't just a villager. The demon found the fighter's presence quite amusing. The fighter looked intently at the demon, realizing the situation was different from what he was told. He observed the small horns on the demon, confirming that they were indeed growing, unlike the previous lesser demons. The fighter cursed, understanding this was a much tougher opponent than expected. He gripped his axe tightly, ready to fight this powerful, newly revealed demon. The man stood ready, covered in blood, facing a glowing red demon inside a dark cave. He cursed under his breath, already feeling the strain of the fight. Despite his injuries, his expression was set with fierce determination. The demon noticed the man's look and thought about the horn growing on its head, which meant it was turning from a lesser demon into an intermediate demon. It also thought that it liked humans because they were weak and easy to control. The demon advanced with glowing red eyes and sharp claws, showing off its scary new form. It moved so fast that it was just a blur of red energy. The man quickly reacted, just managing to block the attack based on pure feeling. The force of the impact was tremendous, shaking the man to his core. The demon's weapon scraped against the man's blade, creating sparks, as the demon gloated about liking humans for their weakness. The man realized he lost track of the demon's movements for a second and only blocked it by instinct. He confirmed his suspicion. This enemy had the power and speed of more than just a weak demon. The man swung his weapon back, creating a bright arc of light as he was pushed back. The demon raged because the man had killed too many of its goblins. The monster declared that it was starting to hate humans and demanded the man beg for forgiveness. It then explained that while a lesser demon could be beaten by a few untrained men, an intermediate demon was a real threat, even for elite soldiers. The man just stared, processing the creature's words while holding his weapon. The demon offered the man a chance to live. It told the man not to use the arm that was holding his axe. The demon gave a gruesome order: cut off that arm with the axe, and then eat all the flesh and bone. If the man ate every single piece of flesh, the demon promised to let him live. The man thought to himself that in his current condition, fighting a full intermediate demon would be very hard. However, he reasoned that the fight might be easier now, while the demon's horns were not fully grown. The demon got agitated, asking what the man was doing and why he wasn't following the gruesome instructions. The man replied that the demon had been too noisy the whole time. He then scornfully stated that he does not listen to something as worthless as a blood bag like the demon. The man then pulled out a pouch filled with liquid, holding it up to his face. He quickly pierced the pouch, letting the liquid drip out. The demon caught a whiff of the dripping liquid and was shocked, wondering if it was what it thought it smelled. The monster asked why a human would possess such a thing, looking surprised as the man prepared to drink from the pouch. The man tipped the pouch back, and the dark liquid went down his throat with a gulp. The empty pouch fell to the ground after the man finished drinking. A strong dark red aura suddenly surrounded the man, who stood firm, muscles bulging, with an X-shaped scar visible on his chest. The man let out a powerful, agonizing scream as the drink took effect. Close up on the man's face and chest as he roared in pain and power. The demon watched him, still holding its sharp claws, looking annoyed but not yet scared. The man's eyes flared with a bright, intimidating red glow, reflecting the surrounding red energy. More intense energy bursts surrounded the man as he powered up. A title card appeared, showing the chapter number and title, followed by a note about the old blood that was thankfully still effective. Now powered up by the old blood, the man gripped his axe, his eyes burning red against the crimson background. He thought the effect wouldn't last long, so he needed to end the fight quickly, which caused the demon to wonder if it was truly feeling fear from a mere human. The demon quickly dismissed the feeling, believing it had gained new power too and that it would kill the man. The demon roared, "Die!" It lunged forward with tremendous speed. The intermediate demon moved rapidly, engulfed in red energy. The man internally noted that demons are cunning, and if it sensed danger, it would have fled, making him wonder if the growth of its horns had messed up the demon's judgment. He focused, realizing the fight was his chance now that he could finally see the demon's movements clearly. The demon's claws swung toward him, surrounded by a crimson aura. The man stated that now, he could finally see its movements. Looking determined, he swung his axe in a powerful arc. The axe connected with a blinding flash as the demon was struck. The man was thrown backward slightly from the force of the blow. The demon let out a shriek, reeling back slightly from the unexpected hit. The man looked down at his axe, noting the impact. He knew that if he kept fighting like this, the axe blade would shatter soon. But the man was ready for that, planning to switch to his sword, and if the sword broke, he would just use his fists. He gritted his teeth in resolve. The demon, enraged, screamed that the human was unforgivable. Its face contorted in a furious, wide-mouthed roar. The demon's foot stomped down hard as the man braced himself. The demon paused, realizing something was wrong, sensing a shift in the battle. The man channeled his power and swung down with immense force. He brought his weapon down with a mighty force covered in dark, red-tinged energy. The weapon struck the demon with incredible speed. The demon let out a loud scream as the man's attack landed squarely. The demon stumbled backward, its massive clawed hands scraping the ground. The demon could only mutter, "What power," as it realized the sheer destructive force of the man's attack. The demon felt its body being hit hard, while the man prepared another swing. The man roared, pushing through the pain and the demon's counterattack. Another sharp impact resonated as the man's attack connected. The man delivered a sweeping blow that sent debris flying, pushing the demon back with overwhelming strength. The demon was stunned by the immense, destructive force coming from a mere human. It shrieked in disbelief, wondering how a human could possess such might. The demon's face was a mask of horror as it tried to claw at the man. The man took the hit, absorbing it to deliver his own counterattack. A massive impact flashed as the man countered the demon's attack with his own. The demon shrieked again as it was forcefully knocked back across the cavern floor. The man focused his power, preparing for the next move. The demon looked up from the ground, its expression shifting to cunning. The man continued to pour power into his weapon, ready for the next engagement. He spun, engulfed in a fiery red aura, ready to attack again. The man shouted "Hup!" as he prepared his next move. The demon suddenly sensed danger from another direction and thought, "It's dangerous." As the demon tried to scramble back, the ground shook from the energy. The man landed a blow that cracked the ground around them, sending rocks flying. The man stood back up, covered in blood but radiating dark red power, weapons in hand, on the ruined battlefield. The demon cried out in pain and confusion, asking what the man was. The demon stared, realizing the man was not human at all. The man looked back with cold, red eyes, confirming the demon's realization. The demon's eyes showed shock as it processed the situation. It concluded that the man must be a monster disguised as a human. The demon let out another terrified scream. It tried to grab the man, but the man retaliated with a powerful swing. The demon was caught off guard by the man's sudden counter, clinging to the man's body. The demon was now being held by the man, who seemed to be overpowering it, and it realized the man was reading all its moves. The demon thought attacking head-on was useless because the man knew its attacks already. The demon panicked, yelling at some unseen allies to stay away from the dangerous fight. A different human, holding a lit torch, was terrified and told everyone to get back. The fearful human warned the others not to come closer, threatening to use the fire. The smaller, weaker goblins hesitated, intimidated by the torch's fire. The torch blazed intensely, radiating heat. The main demon, seeing the fire, remembered something and thought, "Right, that fire." It desperately wished that the fire could be gone. As the man prepared to strike again, the demon was trying to escape, climbing on the cave walls. The man recognized the direction the demon was trying to escape toward. The man didn't let go of his axe handle, ready to use it differently. He knew exactly what the demon was aiming for with its escape route. The man held up his axe, his eyes blazing red, refusing to let the demon have its way. He declared firmly that he would not let the demon succeed. The man's face, dripping with blood and framed by glowing red eyes, showed absolute resolve to win. The fight was intense, with the big red demon facing off against the man who looked ready to fight. The demon noticed how fast the man was moving on his feet. The demon thought that trying to hit him directly would just result in the man dodging anyway. Because of this, the man decided he had to change his plan completely. He gripped his bloody axe tightly, preparing for a massive swing. He declared that he would destroy the very ground beneath the demon's feet. With a grunt, the man swung his weapon with incredible force. The resulting strike sent the demon flying backward as dust and debris exploded everywhere. The demon cried out in pain from the unexpected, powerful attack. The axe connected with a huge force, spinning through the air. The impact caused a massive explosion of rock and earth. Meanwhile, some goblins nearby, holding a torch, looked shocked at the powerful blow. One of the villagers nearby looked terrified as the huge demon was being slammed down. The demon was hit hard, with dust and debris flying everywhere from the cave floor. Another large impact shot rocked the area, sending more debris flying. The demon cried out again, trying to protect itself as dust filled the air. The dust seemed to annoy the demon, who complained about getting dirt in its eyes. The man, covered in blood and glowing with dark energy, prepared for his next move. He looked ready to strike again as intense dark energy flared around him. The sword was stuck deep into the demon's head, causing it to cry out in pain. The demon was struggling against the sword, piercing its head, while the man held onto it tightly. The man commented on the demon's face, saying it now had quite a handsome look. The demon, enraged, screamed that it would kill the man. The sword was buried deep into the demon's skull, which was still partially alive. The man was surprised that the creature was still moving even after having its head pierced. He gripped the hilt of the sword tighter, surrounded by red energy. The man felt immense pain from the struggle, and the demon also screamed in agony. The demon was in pain, begging for the man to stop attacking. As the man moved, a small goblin was seen reacting in fear behind him. Another larger winged figure seemed to be rushing in or descending from above. The man stood up after the final attack, shaking off the dust and dark aura. The demon let out final groans before collapsing into darkness. The sword blast seemed to have finally finished the powerful intermediate demon. The man stood there, muscles defined, turning to look away from the fight's aftermath. He realized the buff he received just in time had saved him from fighting the demon without its boost. He was relieved. The man seemed to hear a sound or call, making him pause and look around with concern. The surviving goblins, seeing the big demon defeated, seemed to panic and one shouted loudly. The goblins' aggressive behavior calmed down now that their leader was dead, but they had already been corrupted once. The strong man stood tall, covered in gore, determined to deal with the remaining threats. He still held his bloody sword, ready for the last few goblins. He dropped down next to a fallen goblin, still holding his sword firmly. He noticed that the remaining goblins had already been turned into monsters before. The man smiled slightly, saying he would take care of every last one of them before leaving. One of the goblins squealed in terror. The man quickly dispatched one goblin who was holding a torch. He moved swiftly, covered in blood, as he struck down another goblin. The remaining goblin cried out in confusion and fear. The man stood, dripping blood, looking resolved after finishing off the last of the immediate threats. He realized that one goblin was trying to run away, and he focused his gaze toward the torchlight. He noticed the last remaining goblin was holding the only torch nearby. The man, sword raised, cornered the last goblin holding the torch. He moved so fast that the traveling merchant cried out in shock. The merchant yelled out in panic, concerned for the man. The merchant was clearly disturbed by what he saw happening. The merchant struggled against the man's grip, perhaps trying to stop him from killing the last goblin. The merchant was clearly in distress, looking on with wide eyes. The man held the merchant's hand back, who was trying to intervene. The man looked back with a stern expression. The merchant asked if the man was all right, noticing he looked pale, possibly due to his injuries. The man apologized and explained that the darkness made it hard to see clearly, then pointed deeper into the cave about the children. He decided they needed to finish off any remaining goblins, rescue the children, and go back to the village. The merchant agreed to the plan, looking slightly relieved but still anxious. The mercenary, carrying the dead demon and accompanied by the torch-bearing merchant, headed out of the cave. As they left the dark cave, the merchant excitedly announced that the children were back. The villagers outside, hearing the news, reacted with shock and relief, with one woman crying out in joy. The villagers rushed forward, calling out names like Saren, Amelia, and Ronnie, happy to see the children safe. A woman named Elga knelt to hug one of the rescued children tightly, and the merchant thanked her profusely. The villagers thanked the mercenary, but the merchant looked closer and asked about the large red thing on the mercenary's shoulder. Another villager thanked the mercenary, and an older woman offered him chicken and barley stew at her house. The mercenary told the woman to give that food to the hungry children who were crying all night. He then told the traveling merchant to eat with them. The merchant asked what the mercenary would eat, and he replied that he needed to rest first. The merchant and the children looked on with worry as the strong man turned to leave to rest. The mercenary turned his back on the village, while the merchant and a child looked on. The children looked confused and worried as the mercenary walked away. The merchant was visibly shocked and confused by the mercenary's abrupt departure. The merchant looked terrified and asked what was happening. The children who were captured were mumbling strange, cult-like phrases about rifts and light. The villagers were covering their ears in distress. One child was crying out, begging not to be abandoned, as the mercenary explained they had been brainwashed. The merchant was shocked to hear about the brainwashing, and the mercenary confirmed it. The mercenary explained that the captors made the children repeat negative things until their minds broke. The brainwashing included telling them their parents abandoned them and that they were useless, a process so strong even a priest couldn't withstand it. The mercenary clarified that it wasn't just mind trickery, it carved the fact of their parents abandoning them into their minds. He stated that having been abandoned by their whole world and having this constantly drilled in made it impossible for the children to grow normally. The merchant was horrified, asking why a demon would do something so cruel. The mercenary simply replied that causing human suffering and despair is the demon's main source of food. The mercenary looked serious as he explained the demon's nature, leaving a silence in the air. The merchant asked if the mercenary meant that the children would have been better off if the demon was less cruel. The merchant hopefully asked if the parents could repent and recover the children's minds with sincerity. The mercenary replied that he doubted it, especially since the parents already abandoned their children once to save themselves. The mercenary gave a grim outlook, suggesting that repentance from those parents was unlikely to be enough. He finished by saying he doubted the parents who abandoned their kids once could ever be capable of such sincerity. The merchant looked up at the sky, speechless after hearing the mercenary's harsh assessment. The mercenary turned and began walking away from the village. He walked through the gates, carrying the dead demon on his back while the merchant and a child watched him leave. The child looked on with a shocked expression. The child cried out in surprise, asking why the mercenary was leaving so soon. The child pleaded with the mercenary to stay and rest, pointing out his injuries hadn't healed. The mercenary stated he couldn't stay because a witness had likely already talked. He added that while killing soldiers and prisoners might be ignored, killing a holy knight would not be overlooked. The mercenary started wrapping a bandage around his wrist. The merchant suddenly remembered that the monstrous barbarian had killed one of Elga's holy knights. The mercenary's eyes narrowed, saying that if they were unlucky, people might already be tracking them. He concluded that they needed to hurry and leave immediately. Meanwhile, outside the village, under a gray sky filled with crows, heavily armored holy knights arrived, standing near a tall standard. The child watched silently as the knights appeared, one of them wearing armor with a prominent star symbol. A stern-looking female knight, fully armored, stood observing the area. The strong man has successfully obtained the demon's blood, and it looks like he has about half a bottle filled. He figures this should be enough for any emergencies he might face. With his initial goal for visiting the village complete, the villagers watch him closely, wondering about the dead demon. He confirms to himself that he has achieved what he came for, which was collecting the blood. Then, he forcefully slams the demon's corpse down. One of the villagers nervously asks the mercenary what he plans to do with the demon's body. The mercenary states clearly that he does not need it and tells them to burn it. The villagers are shocked because they thought he caught the demon for money, given all the effort he put in. They wonder why he would take the blood but want to burn the valuable corpse, questioning if he knows its worth. However, one villager realizes this is good news for him because if he saves the corpse, he might sell it to a holy knight or a merchant later for a good price. Another villager warns that if the corpse is not burned, the smell of blood will attract other creatures. If other creatures eat the corpse, they will turn into monsters, and the villagers definitely do not want another attack from rampaging goblins. The villagers quickly agree to burn it right away, as the mercenary stares intently at them. They confirm they were already planning to burn the body immediately, while some villagers start moving to handle the demon's remains. The mercenary turns away from the dead demon. A villager approaches the mercenary, offering some items they gathered as thanks for saving the children. The offerings include a new pair of boots, a belt, and some pouches, which the villager humbly asks him to accept. The mercenary pauses, then agrees that he will put the gifted items to good use. He immediately starts putting on the new boots and examining the belt. He notes that the new gear is quite useful, as one of the villagers looks on with concern. He secures the new belt and checks the small axe he fastens to it. The mercenary then declares that it is time to leave. Suddenly, he clutches his chest with a sharp intake of breath, making the villagers look on in confusion and shock. He realizes the wound he got from the Holy Knight is what's bothering him. He notes that his body recovers very fast from the demon's wound, which was only from yesterday, but this older wound from the night still won't heal. This old wound, which is over 10 days old, refuses to heal, making him think about the blessed weapon used by the knight. He confirms that the spear used by the Holy Knight was definitely not an ordinary one. The scene shifts to a dark, gloomy place with crows flying around a tall, spear-like object. Crows caw as they circle a tall, metallic structure against a gray sky. The focus shifts to a woman in elaborate armor, Lady Helia, who looks serious. Lady Helia is shown in her full Holy Knight armor, holding her sword. Her subordinate, Eden, standing beside her, reports that he has searched everywhere but could not find any important clues about the incident. Lady Helia sighs, calling Eden pathetic and telling him not to just look, but to deduce the culprit's intentions from the scene. She points out that they even killed all the prisoners, so rescuing them was clearly not the goal, and none of the soldiers' equipment was stolen. She then asks why the demon's corpse was mutilated, questioning what kind of sacrilegious group could do such a thing and demanding to know who they are. Eden asks for clarification about the sacrilegious group, prompting Lady Helia to call him an imbecile. She fiercely tells him to find clues based on his deduction, reminding him that despite his time since becoming a paladin, he hasn't moved up in rank. Lady Helia scolds Eden, saying there is a reason he is still just a paladin even after so long. Eden thinks to himself that she is arrogant, but given who she is, he cannot argue, even though she does not know the answer either. The text reveals the identity of the woman, Arch-Paladin Helia Muviel, standing over the massive pile of defeated demon bodies. The pile of dark, monstrous bodies shows evidence of a fierce battle. It is revealed that Helia is the Empire's youngest Arch-Paladin, who achieved that rank by defeating 20 demons by herself. Eden admits that while her personality is bad, her skill is the real deal, but still finds the situation frustrating. He concludes that a mere paladin like himself cannot take on someone of her level, so he must accept the situation. Lady Helia demands that Eden bring out the holy relic given to them by Archbishop Irensko. Eden reacts with surprise, asking if she means Damien's twin mirrors. He pleads with her to reconsider, pointing out that it has not even been 10 years since the other mirror broke. The narration explains that Damien's twin mirrors are a holy relic, a pair of mirrors that show scenes from the future and the past, respectively. The mirror that saw the future shattered after seeing an impossibly powerful being, leaving only the one that sees the past, which Helia insists they use now. Lady Helia angrily shouts, demanding to know if Eden will report to the Archbishop that he has no idea why the Archbishop's nephew, Linton, died. Eden falls silent, prompting Helia to tell him to stop worrying, as the mirror will not break unless it reflects a great demon. Eden then presents the remaining mirror, the one that reflects the past. Lady Helia kneels down on the grass, holding the star-shaped mirror. As she activates the mirror, a bright light shines from it, causing a shockwave. The light intensifies, and in the reflection, they see the barbarian figure glowing intensely. The people watching gasp, asking who the barbarian is, as a fierce purple aura surrounds the man. They notice he is drinking the demon's blood, considering it sacrilege to use a blessed weapon in such a manner, and some urge him to stop. The figure stands tall, holding his weapon, and someone yells for everyone to run. Lady Helia and Eden watch in shock as the barbarian's transformation happens. Lady Helia exclaims in horror at what she is seeing, while the barbarian's eyes glow red with power. The mirror suddenly shatters with a loud crack. Eden cries out that the mirror broke. Lady Helia is stunned that the mirror, which should only break when reflecting a great demon, has shattered. This means the mirror reflected someone who is on par with a great demon. Eden expresses disbelief at the bizarre situation and tells Lady Helia they must report this to the Holy Capital immediately. Lady Helia refuses, stating that since the culprit has been revealed, there is no need to return to the Holy Capital. She declares firmly that they will continue the search for the perpetrator themselves. Eden protests her decision with a shocked exclamation as Helia grips her sword, preparing for action. Lady Helia moves quickly, creating a burst of power as she charges forward. She calls the target that fiend in human skin. Lady Helia declares with intense focus that she will eliminate the threat with her own hands. The scene shifts to a dark forest at night. The environment is dark with dense trees under a deep blue night sky. A villager is seen kneeling by the water, reflecting on his life, feeling like he would end up a madman unable to trust or love anyone. He wonders if it is because of his 8-year-old son back home, or the worry for the village children that keeps him troubled. He resolves that if he wants to survive and get back to his family safely, he must force himself to be cheerful, especially because he can't face them in his current state. Meanwhile, the mercenary lies near a campfire, looking exhausted as the night deepens. A young man approaches the mercenary, asking if he has been waiting long and promising to prepare a meal right away. The young man is startled to see the mercenary already lying down, wondering why he is resting when he is so strong. He cries out in alarm upon seeing the mercenary's condition. He expresses shock as the mercenary could tear a demon to shreds and questions why he is suddenly in such a state. The mercenary groans, realizing he should have understood sooner about the wound. The young man gasps, pointing out the terrible wound on his chest and asking what happened so suddenly. The mercenary thinks to himself that he should have realized sooner about the blessed weapon. He wonders if it was imbued with a blessing specifically meant to inflict fatal wounds on demons. He knows such a blessing usually wouldn't affect a human, but he is a berserker who gains power from demon blood. He realizes he must have been affected because he drank the demon's blood. The young man regrets that they left the village that day and wishes the mercenary had rested for a few more days. The mercenary tells him that resting won't heal this kind of wound and asks a critical question about the moon from the previous night. The young man, confused, answers that he thinks it was a fully tilted waning crescent moon. The mercenary is relieved, realizing he hasn't missed his chance because of the moon's phase. He thinks to himself that if it is tonight, something important might happen. The young man looks around in confusion as a strange sound echoes. The young man hears a sound and wonders if it could be what he fears. A terrifying growling sound is heard from the dark woods, where many pairs of glowing yellow eyes are watching them. The sound is accompanied by a heavy paw stepping onto the ground near the mercenary. A vicious-looking blade wolf emerges from the darkness, growling fiercely. The young man cries out, recognizing them as blade wolves, while the mercenary looks serious. The mercenary breathes out, then picks up the axe he had dropped earlier and also retrieves his sword. The mercenary tells the young man to stand back, showing his readiness to fight despite his injury. The young man protests, worried about the mercenary's wound, as the mercenary thinks about how this world just won't leave him alone. He curses the damuts that are approaching. Several aggressive blade wolves emerge from the dark woods surrounding the mercenary. The mercenary states that the young man could have paid his get-well visit a little later, implying he should have stayed safe. The mercenary readies his sword to face the attacking wolves. A huge, fierce wolf is seen up close, looking aggressive in the dark. The wolf continues its attack as a man breathes heavily, clearly tired from the fight. The man is sweating a lot and letting out a sigh, his body still under strain. The scene shifts to a small camp where the man, holding an axe, is defending against a pack of vicious wolves while another person tends a fire. The wolves are closing in on the camp with dangerous intent. One of the wolves bares its teeth and lunges forward with raw aggression. The action speeds up as the man prepares to strike. He swings his axe with great force. The axe connects with one wolf's head in a brutal blow, sending blood flying. The wolf is struck hard and falls back, while the fight continues with other wolves. The remaining wolves look on in shock and fear after seeing one of their own fall. The man is frustrated, thinking he missed his target, aiming for the eyes but hitting elsewhere. He realizes his vision is becoming blurry, which makes it hard to aim correctly. More wolves charge in with loud snarls, attacking him from multiple sides. The man drops the axe and quickly draws his sword, ready for the next move. His face shows intense concentration and determination as he readies his sword. He uses the sword to fight off the attacking wolves, blood getting on his weapon. He is struggling a bit as another wolf tries to bite him while he fights the first one. He manages to connect with another blow with the sword, driving it into an attacker. One wolf is hit hard, and the man grunts in effort. The man holds the sword tight, keeping the wolf at bay, while another nearby wolf snarls. Another wolf manages to get close, scratching him, making him react with a sharp intake of breath. A tight focus on the man's eyes shows his intense struggle and focus despite the pain. He lets out a pained sound as he takes another hit or strain. He strikes another wolf with force, causing a loud impact sound. The wolves are closing in, and the man grits his teeth in pain or anger. He turns his head slightly, sweating and showing the strain on his powerful body. The man keeps fighting the wolf attacking his head, covered in blood from the battle. After clearing some immediate threats, the man leans on his bloody sword, catching his breath, while more wolves watch. The ground is littered with the bodies of the wolves he has already defeated. Suddenly, more wolves appear, growling loudly, ready to attack the weary man. The man observes the remaining wolves, realizing they hunt in groups and are now regrouping after seeing their comrades fall. He admits to himself that if his body was in better condition, it wouldn't be an issue, but right now, he cannot last long. The nearby villager shouts in panic, telling the wolves to stay back, looking very confused. The villager frantically waves burning sticks around the fire, trying to scare the beasts away from him. The remaining wolves circle, eyeing both the fighter and the villager. The fighter knows that in his current state, using his last resort is like taking poison, but he has no other choice. This space is used for sound effect transition. He desperately uses a straw tube attached to a flask to drink a dark liquid. The empty flask is thrown aside after he drinks the contents. As the man stands up, a powerful red aura surrounds him, making him look immensely powerful, while the wolves look intimidated. The wolves gulp in fear, sensing a huge change in the man's power level. The man's eyes glow intensely red, showing the effect of what he just drank. The giant wolf pack leader charges at him. The villager is terrified, holding his torch as high as the pack leader attacks. The pack leader rushes forward, glowing with menacing energy. The man is about to be struck by the enormous wolf, much to the villager's horror. The villager's face shows pure shock at what is about to happen. The scene shows the intensity of the attack impact. The man is surrounded by the enraged wolves, bathed in the red glow of his new power. He swings his sword, which now glows with energy, at the approaching beasts. He reflects that the effect of this blood berserker buff changes based on which demon's blood he consumes. He thinks this time the buff is likely an agility enhancement, similar to the power of a very quick demon he fought before. The man stands firm, glowing red, as two large wolves charge him from behind. The man's determined face is covered in the red aura, powering up from the drink. He confirms that he has gained agility enhancement from the potion. With his enhanced agility, he dodges the attacks of the wolves with blazing speed. He recalls the quickness of the demon whose blood he drank, noting how annoying its speed was. He confirms that, as expected, this is the effect he got, and he looks down at the remaining wolves. The remaining wolves are frozen, watching the massive increase in the man's power. The villager is bewildered, asking the man if he is okay as the wolves start to run away. The villager exclaims that the wolves are running away, and the man wonders why they are retreating. The man feels a massive shift in power and realizes this is not what he expected. A massive impact occurs on the ground as something huge lands or attacks. The man, surrounded by his red aura, kneels slightly, holding his sword, while the villager looks on in terror at the massive creature now present. The pack leader, now looking even larger and more ferocious, stares at the man with glowing eyes. The wolf lets out a deep growl, and the villager points out something strange about this particular wolf. Perhaps it is the pack leader. The pack leader looms over the man, much bigger than the other wolves. The man curses, realizing this must be the pack leader, and worries because the buff he took might expire soon. He fears the buff ending at the worst time, especially as the pack leader seems to be using a strong move. The pack leader attacks with incredible speed and power. The attack passes with a great swoosh, and the man wonders what kind of power the leader possesses. The man is clearly struggling under the immense force, wondering if the leader is trying to crush him with sheer weight. He lets out a gasp of exertion as he is being overpowered by the weight. He yells out in pain or effort while trying to resist the crushing pressure. He lets out a sound of pain, and the villager cries out, telling him to snap out of it and focus on the wolf. The villager pleads with the man to recover quickly because the massive wolf is right there. The villager desperately urges him to regain his senses and fight the wolf. The man is still struggling under the weight of the giant wolf while the villager holds his torch in fear. The man gasps, feeling the extreme pressure and his own current limitations. The pack leader roars, looking down upon the struggling hero. The villager tries to encourage him, noting that the conditions for his power boost should have already been met, asking why it hasn't worked fully yet. The man looks up toward the sky with a strained expression as the villager asks why he is looking up when the wolf is right in front of him. The man is focused on something in the sky as the wolf prepares another powerful move. He senses that whatever he was waiting for has arrived. His eye widens, showing intense focus as he confirms the arrival of the awaited event. A thought flashes about midnight on the night when the moon has completely hidden itself, indicating a specific time for something. The man stands up straight, his back to the viewer, facing the night sky. He slams his sword point into the ground with great force. As he holds his sword, he begins a ritual, invoking the spirit of a great warrior named Atala. He calls upon Atala, the master of 10,000 soldiers, and asks to place the warrior's blade in his hands. The villager looks on confused by the strange ritual. He continues the invocation, asking the spirit to bless the warrior who thirsts for battle so he can quench his thirst with the blood of enemies. He concludes the ritual by stating that on the night the moon hides, he bestows a blood-soaked name upon the blade. As the man finishes his naming, the villager looks confused, and a bright light surrounds the sword. The pack leader, now looking stunned, watches as the man kneels, holding the glowing sword upright. The wolf lets out a bewildered sound, and the man's aura flares with intense power. The villager is shocked, exclaiming about what is happening. A massive, fiery energy erupts around the man as the naming ritual completes. The man kneels, engulfed in a powerful, warm, bright aura, holding his sword vertical. This part is a transition panel showing the intensity of the power. The man focuses, feeling a reverberation of will, something he also experienced in his first playthrough. He states that the name he will give the sword is about to be revealed. His eye glows intensely as he declares the name for his sword. He announces the name he has chosen for the sword, Mosquito. The power surrounding the man and the sword intensifies with fiery red energy. The sword emits a blinding flash of red light as the naming effect takes hold. A symbol appears on the sword's hilt, glowing brightly in red. He recognizes this as a unique trait being activated. The man looks up with a determined expression, revealing that he is the one who bestows names. The berserker stood amidst a fiery glow, holding his bloodied sword, feeling a strange power surge. A question hung in the air. What name should be given to this very sword now? He looked up with an intense gaze and declared the sword's name would be Mosquito. Indeed, he had decided the sword's name would be Mosquito as the power activated. As the name settled, a sound echoed, showing a powerful energy focused on the blade. A strange symbol appeared on the sword, signifying the activation of a special effect. The surviving white wolf let out a terrifying howl, still threatening the barbarian. The barbarian turned to face the beast, his muscular back showing the recent fight's toll. The traveling merchant cried out in fear for his companion, the barbarian. The barbarian struck swiftly, sending the massive wolf reeling back with a powerful blow. He followed up with a heavy stomp, continuing the relentless attack on the monster. The fight was intense, but then a notification announced that a special effect was activated. Dark, reddish energy swirled around the blade after it struck the enemy. The special effect was revealed to be vampirism, which restored a small amount of health. With the healing, the barbarian felt strong enough to live again, as even some wounds started to heal. The white wolf, wounded but furious, showed its menacing grin. However, the barbarian knew this little bit of healing was not enough yet. He challenged the monster for another round, calling the wolf a damn son of a bitch as the chapter title appeared. Another heavy strike landed on the wolf's head, covered in its own dark blood. The wolf thrashed wildly as the dark energy of the effect started working on the barbarian's body. The beast's eyes burned with rage as the healing continued despite the severe wound. The barbarian stood firm, holding his sword, looking absolutely dominant now. A system message confirmed that a small amount of health was restored, and then, amazingly, all wounds were healed. He confirmed that even the fatal wound from the Holy Knight had completely healed over. He thought that these monsters showing up were actually helpful in the end as he surveyed the slain wolves. The ground was littered with the dead bodies of the white wolves, showing the scale of the battle. Looking at the sword, he noted that an ancient script, probably meaning mosquito, appeared on it, though he couldn't read it. The vampirism effect restored life force with every damage dealt, but since the sword was low grade, the healing wasn't very strong. To fully recover from such a bad state, he would need to kill dozens of monsters, and it wouldn't work on enemies without blood. The barbarian sighed, realizing this much healing was sufficient for the moment. He thought to himself, looking determined. Getting a new special effect without materials was a big plus, and it wasn't a one-time trick. He remembered a lesson from his first life. Expecting too much too soon only brings trouble. As he gripped his weapon, hiding behind a tree, the merchant peeked out, realizing the terrifying wolf leader was dead and the pack was massacred. He stepped out, thinking the barbarian should have collapsed from his injuries, and approached him. The merchant asked if the barbarian was okay, but the warrior turned and questioned him abruptly, asking why he didn't run. The merchant was shocked that the barbarian's wounds, including the one from the Holy Knight, were all gone. The barbarian asked the merchant why he hadn't used the chance to run away when he was weak. The merchant looked confused, then realized that if he had run, the wolves would have easily caught him anyway. The merchant pondered this, wondering why he hadn't thought of running, and the barbarian just grunted. The merchant thought hard, his expression shifting from contemplation to sudden realization and fear. He realized that he was too worried about the injured barbarian to even think about running away himself. The barbarian told the traveling merchant to keep watch because he was exhausted and needed some sleep, while the merchant looked terrified. The merchant thought about how he was so focused on the barbarian that he didn't consider escaping alone. The barbarian turned to leave, telling the merchant to watch carefully as he was going to rest. The merchant nervously agreed, but the barbarian warned him that if he tried to run, he would pull his intestines out and make a rope from them. The merchant shrieked in terror, realizing the barbarian was totally serious about his threat. He wondered if the barbarian was joking, but coming from a barbarian, he knew it must be true, worrying about crossing the border now. Later, under the dark night sky, the merchant sat near a small fire, looking distressed. He sat there, clearly still shaken by the barbarian's intense threat. The next day, the merchant looked up at the bright sky, still looking exhausted. He groaned, telling the barbarian they still had about 10 more days to walk to reach the Alliance's territory because the Empire's southern region was vast. The merchant was pointing at a map, showing the barbarian the route through a scenic but rugged landscape near a river. The merchant asked if they could cross the border without trouble, mentioning he preferred not to meet another holy knight. The barbarian confirmed it should be fine, explaining they deliberately chose this poorly guarded path. The merchant added that they might meet bandits instead of holy knights, but bandits wouldn't be a problem for the barbarian. The barbarian looked puzzled as the merchant explained that at a human level, nothing could stop him. The merchant pointed out a small castle called Multama where they could restock food, noting it was far from the Elba faith's influence. He continued to explain that the Free Cities Alliance territory was smaller and had better roads, which is why they were taking a shortcut. He showed the map again, pointing out that following the shortcut would lead them to the Golden Road and quickly to Vistana on the eastern coast. The barbarian looked thoughtful, acknowledging the journey wouldn't be easy but better than the old times. The merchant recalled that over 300 years ago, the eastern continent was a chaotic place where small kingdoms fought constantly. Back then, people were very exclusive and wouldn't welcome outsiders, especially a huge, potentially rowdy barbarian. The barbarian remembered his first meeting with Melissa, who looked at him like an insect, while she curiously asked what he was talking about regarding a traveling companion. Melissa, a young mage who was a sheltered scholar, was holding a large book. The barbarian justified her reaction, describing himself as an Adalan from the wastelands, copper-skinned and tall like an ogre, making her wonder if he was a hybrid. He recalled that she immediately noted down that a massive barbarian asked to travel with her, worrying about trafficking or criminality. That memory surfaced as a useless thought, but then the merchant spoke about the current times. The merchant assured the barbarian that the Free Cities Alliance is now more open, so he doesn't need to worry too much about his appearance. The merchant tried to insist he was telling the truth, despite the barbarian giving him a questioning look. The barbarian looked ahead down the path where a small group of armed men stood ahead. The barbarian asked the merchant what he thought of the group up ahead. The merchant observed that judging by their clothes, they looked like bandits, and the one scolding them seemed to be a different group. He admitted he wasn't sure what was happening, but suggested they take another path to avoid trouble. However, before they could turn, a different group of men pointed toward the barbarian and the merchant, looking aggressive. The bandits pointed and shouted, telling the other group to run and report back to their boss. The barbarian muttered that this was annoying as he finally focused on the situation. He smoothly drew his sword, ready for a fight. The barbarian stepped forward, dropping his defensive stance. He charged toward the group of bandits who were harassing the other travelers. The barbarian stared down at the approaching group with a grim expression. One of the bandits screamed in shock as the barbarian attacked, his eyes glowing with dark energy. The bandit leader, seeing the barbarian charge, gloated, asking his men if they saw that he wouldn't come, and challenged the others to mess with them now. The other bandits were confused, demanding to know what the first group meant, since the barbarian was right there. The first group shouted that the others were running away and told them to hurry up and tell their idiot boss. The bandits laughed, delighted that their connections worked, and called the other group nobodies, while the barbarian stepped in asking what this was all about. One bandit dismissed the other group as nobodies and then loudly announced that Agon's raging horn was here. The barbarian glared at them and stated he would ask one last time what they were doing. The bandit leader apologized, thanking the Mr. Barbarian for helping them. He then asked if he should call him Agon's raging horn instead, but the barbarian sighed, denying that name. The barbarian made it clear he had no intention of helping them and told them to get out of his way or die. A blank panel shows the tension in the air. The bandits and the group they were harassing just stood there silently, utterly stunned. The bandit leader reacted strongly, pulling his own weapon and demanding to know who the barbarian thought he was to show up and confuse them. The bandit's face contorted in rage and disbelief at the barbarian's dismissal. He cursed the barbarian, calling him a good-for-nothing bastard, while the merchant squeaked in fright. The barbarian remained unfazed, looking intensely at the angry men before him.
Smash that like button. If this is your first time here or you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe right now. And yes, activate that hype button too so the video can reach even more people. Drop your opinion in the comments or leave a funny emoji. Everything works. Every single like, subscribe, and hype gives us a power boost, bro.